maybe one or two other items, and stir them in. And then you'd sometimes we'd put it in the fridge to kind of chill it down as much as you could. Then you'd pour it into the ice cream maker and fill it with ice and salt.
Nice.
And turn the.
So your dad made ice cream from the time you were a kid, and did all the other kids come over and want the ice cream?
Yeah.
But he made the ice cream because his dad was the canal master, and during the winter they would cut the blocks out of the canals of ice and put them in an underground ice house, and then all summer long they would make ice cream.
And they would sell the ice.
During the Depression, I'm assuming?
It was before the Depression. It was my dad was a teenager, so it was like I'd say it was World War I time, 1915 to 1920 or
and then like
something like that, 1920 to 1930 something.
So you think that like people from the whole little small town, Tremont,
Why they come over for ice cream and buy a box of ice so they could keep their milk and stuff cold for the summer.
That's pretty amazing.
It was pretty cool.
Your dad made lemon flavored ice cream till the day he died. I swear to God, he always made ice cream.
And it was good.
Oh, it was so good.
It was so smooth. Oh God.
It was so good.
But what happened to my dad? I don't know. I guess you know about it. What happened to my dad was, so they had this farm in Tremont, and my dad's mother became really, really sick. She had really, really high blood pressure. Surprise, surprise.
Okay.
She had such high blood pressure that they thought she would die by living in a higher altitude. So her doctor suggested they should move to California.
Where were they then before?
In Tremont.
They were in Tremont and moved to California.
Right.
I thought they moved to Oregon.
Well, they didn't. They really moved to Oregon. They didn't move to California. They actually moved to Oregon. So they took the old Overland and all of their tools and everything to
Which
fix
was
it.
the first car in Tremont because your dad's father was the canal master and he had to have a car, so it was the first car in the town.
So they packed up everything they owned into this old Overland. I mean, it probably looked like the Beverly Hillbillies,
Okay.
And they started out from Tremont to. It's so good. Anyway, so they started off to Oregon, but because the roads were rickety dirt kind of roads.
Yeah.
What would happen is that they could only go about 20 miles a day. This is as fast as they could go from Tremont to Oregon.
In the Overland.
In the Overland.
What year do you think we're talking about here?
Oh, let's see. I think my dad was about 12, and he was born in 1909. So what would that make him?
That'll make 1921.
1921.
So they moved to Oregon in 1921.
Exactly. And so they drove all the way to Oregon, on
ruddy little roads, ruddy
20
little
miles
dirt
a
roads.
day.
That was the problem, right? So they invented cars, and cars were cool, but what was the point? Because all the roads were impassable in cars. Anyway,
exactly. So anyway, so they got to to Oregon. They got to Oregon, and they actually were able to rent a farm that they could try to work on and make enough money to get by.
Where in Oregon, do you know?
Yeah, it was by Portland. It was a little place, kind of. What's the name of it? By Portland. But Portland was just a little rickety place then. There wasn't much there.
Okay.
And so what happened is that my dad had to go to school, but he had to ride 5 or 6 miles to school.
On a horse.
On a horse. But my dad didn't own a horse.
Okay.
So my dad, there were a lot of Indian people that lived in the American Indians that lived in the area, and they had a lot of stray ponies running around. So my dad, at 12 years old, learned how to catch stray ponies. So he would go out and catch these Indian ponies, bring them home and train them, and then he and his sisters could ride to school.
Oh, that's the coolest thing ever.
On an Indian
it is
pony.
true. There were a lot of wild horses in the western U.S. Do you know that, Sophie?
Mm-hmm. But so he rode to school on these old Indian
So
ponies.
he was a horse tamer when he was 12?
When he was 12, he could catch these ponies and ride to school on them.
No kidding. So did he break them and then keep them for a while?
Oh, yeah.
Do you sell them?
Probably some of them.
Okay.
But he went to a little like a one-room schoolhouse is all he really.
So like kindergarten through 12th grade
Yeah,
in one room.
In one room, yeah, in one room. So anyway, so that's how he grew up. But then his mother didn't get any better, and when they left Tremonton, their oldest brother stayed and worked the farm that my grandfather had left.
Okay.
So they ended up.
They left him in Tremonton.
Yeah.
And,
so
the rest of the family went to Oregon.
Went to Oregon, but they didn't get any better.
Okay.
And so they all turned around and came back to Tremonton when I would say he was around 17, 18 years old.
Okay.
But then there wasn't much to do in Tremonton either, and so he got a job thinning beets.
Thinning beets.
Thinning
What
beets.
does
That's what they
that
raised in
mean?
Tremonton was sugar beets. That's what they
Okay.
raised in Tremonton, sugar beets.
Okay.
So what
So
would
all the
happen?
farms. In
Yeah,
the
they're
Fremont area are
all
sugar
farms.
beets.
But it was a big sugar beet area. That's what they.
That's why there was the Utah and Idaho Sugar Company.
Exactly. That's where it came from, Tremonton.
Okay.
So what they would do is they would go through and they would plow these fields and they would just put beet seed or whatever up and down these rows.
Okay.
But beets grow this big around. Sugar beets are
I've
huge,
seen huge, but sugar beets,
gigantic
yeah,
ones,
okay.
and they want them to grow really big.
But there's not enough room for all the seeds.
So he would go out and thin beets, and he would pull out. I don't know whether they pull out 2 out of every 3 or whatever they did. My mother did the same thing. My mother had a job thinning beets too.
This was a job.
It was a job.
Like literally, you'd go there from sunrise to sunset,
Exactly.
pulling every third
Yeah.
beet out to make room for the beets to grow bigger.
Exactly, and the heat and everything else. So that's where he met
Okay.
my mother. He and my mother were
Imagine
both
that. Imagine spending a whole day, every day,
pulling beets out.
pulling out every third beet.
But that's what they did. So they ended up meeting each other thinning beets.
Your parents met
They
doing
met
that.
thinning beets.
No kidding.
And my grandpa, my mother's father, didn't want her to have anything to do with my dad because he wasn't a Mormon.
Well, who would? You don't want your girls marrying those sinful devil
Yeah,
worshippers.
exactly. So anyway, they met thinning beets, and that's where their their love affair started.
Oh, that's so cute. So what else do you know about that love affair?
What do I know about it? Well, my dad told me. My mother always thought that my dad liked his brother's wife better than her.
Really?
She was jealous.
She was jealous all the way to the end.
Yeah, she was.
But
jealous.
let's just be
She
clear
always-
here.
Yeah.
I remember her being jealous when she was a very older lady. When she would
was
toward
jealous.
the end, she was still jealous.
Yeah,
she was
she-
like, I remember her saying, I think Clarence is running around with that lady down the street.
He's only 30 years old, and he was 90.
He was 90, but
She was
he was
30.
running around with a
Yeah,
30-year-old
right.
woman down the street.
But she thought he liked his brother's wife better than he liked
That was
her.
not funny when you said it. It was actually the reason, so that wasn't
It
funny.
was pretty funny.
Yeah,
you-
what a
You're
the
concerned
other.
I had to be there.
You told me. I was there. You were concerned.
I was concerned.
Well, it was. I was
concerned.
worried about it too. I was really
no, that's
worried
true.
about it. I want you to
Nonetheless,
know, you're not.
looking back on it,
you're
it's
not
kind
the
of
only
funny.
one I was worried about that.
Why can't we laugh about it? Is my question.
Yeah, we can laugh
You
about
can
it.
laugh about it, but it
So-
wasn't a light thing. It was a.
It wasn't a light thing. It was a dementia thing. But at the time, but
She was
looking back
pretty
on it, we might as well laugh about it.
Might as well. But at any rate, so she thought he liked his sister-in-law better than he liked her, which he didn't.
Okay.
And have all. We just
So my dad told me later in life, "Yay, cookies!
God, can I have one of those?
Yay,
You can have one.
yay! Can I have one too?
Yes, that's the deal. I made.
Yay, that's the best." So-
I'll buy him more tomorrow.
Oh, yummy, thank you. Oh, thanks, Jess. Anyway, so my dad told me, he was telling me about when they thinned beets together, and he said, that's the only woman I ever looked at in my whole life. I loved her.
Oh my.
I loved her from the minute I set eyes on her. He said, and I don't know why, because she always just wore her hair pulled back in a hairnet, and she didn't have a shape or anything. She was just a skinny little thing with no shape at all.
Cute. So cute.
I loved her anyway.
That's awesome. I love him.
Yeah, it's cool.
So, I seem to remember a story about how he proposed to her.
Yeah.
Tell now I have a version of it in my head, but I'm sure yours is way more accurate. What happened there?
Well, my dad's family had come back to Tremont, and they moved back into their old farm. And they were trying to establish farming again. They were.
Any idea what year we're talking about here?
Yeah, it would have been. My dad was born in 1909. It probably would have been about like 1925 or 24, 26, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
So he had taken my mother over to his parents' house for dinner. He already decided he really liked her. And my dad was really shy. He was really shy. I mean, you remember.
I remember.
Your grandfather never said anything unless he had to.
Although when he did talk,
Yeah, he could
people
talk.
listened. Yeah. When he talked, it was about something that mattered.
Talking that mattered, but so at any rate, they were over at his family's house having dinner, and after dinner, he wanted her to walk out to the barn with him and look at the car he was pulling the engine out of. And he said, Millie, I just want you to marry me. That's all. I just want you to marry me. Let's get married and we'll move away and we'll go somewhere we don't have to be farmers and we'll do something else. And just marry me. And she said, Clarence, I just can't marry you. He says, no way I can marry you. My dad won't put up with it. You're not a Mormon. I just can't marry you. And he said, well, if you don't marry me, I'm just going to kill myself. Well, at the same time, they only have an outhouse. So he was taking his suspenders off to go use the outhouse, and she thought he was going to kill himself. So she said, okay, I'll marry you.
This is the story they told.
That's not the story they told you?
No, I'm telling you, that is the story that they told.
That's the story I heard,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's what my mother told me. So
I don't know. You look at them; they were so vibrant, right? I mean, can you even imagine meeting them at that age, right?
no.
Imagine meeting them when in their 20s. You would have been so happy to be their friend.
Yeah.
And the people who met them and were their friends, trust me, they were happy to be their
Liked
friends. They were extraordinary.
Well, they had fun. They had a lot of fun together, and they either had really happy, wonderful times, or they had really sad, painful times.
Oh my God! Did
As
they
in
have...
life.
Yes, this is life. But
this is life.
They, oh my God, when they were young adults, right? The year she turned 18, the Depression started.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't going to stop Millie.
No, never.
Could anything stop Millie?
No.
She was a
Nothing.
force, right?
She was a
Yeah.
force.
I'm telling you, no matter what happened to her, she was going to rise above.
Mm-hmm. And she did.
And she did. Yeah.
did.
She lost her first baby.
Yeah.
Her second baby, was born with a hole in her heart. But she still lived a really large life. She still She still kept reaching for.
Kept going.
She still kept reaching and reaching and reaching for, a better life for her family.
Yes, she did. She did. She really worked hard for it.
All right, so I want to know what it was like in the Vance household with you and your two younger sisters.
Oh my.
So you were born and you weren't allowed to do anything because you had a hole in your
They're
heart.
gonna die.
God knows you weren't allowed to do sports, but you weren't even allowed to run around and play with kids,
No.
right? But she was going to protect you, so she bought you a Steinway piano,
Yes.
and you were going to learn music lessons, and you were going to be a prodigy. But she still thought you were going to die.
Yeah.
And then Marie was born.
Oh, Marie was full of hell.
They went,
From the day Marie was born, she was trouble.
And she was trouble from the beginning. I mean, I dumped her buggy in the tar.
What? I don't know the
Tell you
story.
about that story?
I don't know the story.
Gosh. Well, as life went on, after I was born, my dad came back from the service. My dad had acute appendicitis. And he was, they rushed him to the hospital and they took his appendix out, and
1946.
it would have been 47,
Okay.
46, 47, somewhere in there. And so, could have been 46. And so, the doctor told him that it was too far for him to drive every day from Salt Lake to Tooele, where he worked. It was too far of a drive because he still had poison in his body from the ruptured appendix, right?
Uh-huh.
So they decided to sell their little house. They had a really cute little house on Browning Avenue.
Uh-huh.
Would be worth lots of money now.
Browning Avenue. What are the
By the
what are the Salt Lake
university.
coordinates of that?
It would be like 14th South and 13th East.
Oh, that's a nice house.
Oh yeah,
Shit, these days that's like $1 million house.
$1 million house for like 900 square feet.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
at any rate, so they decided that they would sell their house and move to Tooele so that he wouldn't have to drive so far.
Uh-huh.
Well, my mother was already back waiting tables at the Hotel Utah. It didn't matter if my mother drove that far because she wasn't sick.
Okay. So they moved to Tooele.
Moved to Tooele.
So
yeah.
Tooele's a town about what? An hour west of Salt Lake.
Yeah, a little more than that.
70 minutes.
But
80
it would have
minutes.
been a real lot longer than that.
a long ass commute.
In those days.
To
it
wait
was.
tables.
Well, it was a longer way away then because we didn't.
Because cars were slower and roads were
all that
smaller.
stuff.
Yeah.
So they moved there, but Tooele was just a little real podunk town.
So,
I mean, really a podunk town. So where they lived there was an old government complex, and it was like these houses were all attached to each other, and there would be like 50 of them in a row going.
so it's an army base.
It's an army base. It's an
the
army base.
In the desert of Utah.
That's what it was.
Right
An
out
army,
it's by
yep.
it's by the Bonneville Salt Flats, right?
Exactly. It's an army base.
So it's an army
exactly.
base in the late 40s.
Right, exactly.
70
had concrete
miles,
floors.
70 minutes west of Salt Lake City.
Yep.
Okay, and it's like just like these thrown up, framed together wood buildings.
Yeah, and
One after the
I
other.
think they were. I want to tell you that my mind tells me they were either concrete block or stucco. I'm not sure,
Okay.
but there were 50 of them in a row.
Huh?
And row after row after row after row. I can't even begin to tell you what they were, but they had concrete floors and old rickety cupboards and stoves you don't know how you could ever cook on and all that stuff. So they moved in there.
Government issue.
Government issue. So that's where they moved to. And my dad continued to work at the Tooele Army Depot.
And what did he do at the?
He's a diesel mechanic.
He was a mechanic. Now, so for some reason, I think he's like a crane operator.
He was a crane operator, but he actually had a degree in diesel mechanics.
Okay, so, but where's the crane part coming from? Because those are different things.
I don't know, but that's what he ended up doing. Even though he had the degree, he still...
So he studied diesel mechanics, and that's what he
Right.
did in the Navy when he worked on submarines.
Yeah.
He was the engineer.
Right.
He kept the
Right.
engine running
Right.
in a submarine, and then
But he ended up, he was a crane operator. He operated, and what they did there was...
they moved nerve gas around for one thing.
That's exactly right. They had a big long railroad that they came by, and they stopped the train there, and they loaded it with different things: tanks, nerve gas.
I've seen pictures of those tanks being
You know.
loaded with cranes at Tooele.
And that was my dad.
No kidding.
That was my dad, and he was their head guy. You know,
Okay.
they loved him.
I remember when he retired.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, go on, please. But so they moved there, and you moved into this little like
Mm-hmm.
cookie bread house on the Tooele Army base. And do you remember this, or do you just know? of it?
No, I remember every bit of it. I have a really
So you were born in
accurate-
45. So what year are we talking about here?
48.
Really? Say 3. We're going back to your 3-year-old memories.
But I have memories even maybe a little bit earlier than that. I remember.
Wait a
that-
minute. You go on.
I remember being born, Jay.
That's what I was going to ask you. You claim you're the only person I've ever known.
I can remember being
You
born.
claim to remember being born.
I can remember being born.
Tell me about that.
That's another story.
I know. We'll get back to
So-
the Tooele story, but I want to know about being born right now.
Yeah, let's talk about my mom and dad.
Okay.
So anyway, my mother and dad moved there, and as it turned out, right after they moved there, my mother found out she was going to have another baby,
Okay. Marie.
So this place was a really rough place. I mean, really, obviously really rough place. There's a little boy next door to me that used to,
Scorpions and rattlesnakes.
oh yeah, he used to steal my cat. I had a Persian blue cat,
Okay.
kitten, okay? He would steal my kitten and stuff it up the drain pipe and wouldn't let it come out. And I would cry and beg him to let my cat come out. I mean,
What a boy.
it's just that it was a rough place.
Okay.
But you had to park up, the road was higher, and then there were these little skinny sidewalks that went down to each, down the road to all of these 50 houses below you, right?
Okay. I think we have some photos of that.
You probably do. I don't remember them, but that's how it was. So anyway, so my mother kept working at the Hotel Utah, and she worked there till she was almost ready to deliver Marie.
So she lived in Tooele and drove to Salt
And
Lake.
drove to Salt Lake, and I remember this really well because my mother would get up my mother had to be there at 6, so my mother would get up at 5 o'clock and load me in the car, probably in my pajamas, who knows, and we would drive to the Hotel Utah, and there was the copper smelter was on the side of the mountain there, up on the side of the mountain, and what would happen is when you drove home at night, they were emptying the slag out of these great big pots, and it would be nighttime, and we would watch them empty that burning slag down the mountain.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can remember watching them empty that burning slag down the mountain. I wasn't 3 yet. It was before Marie was born.
Wow.
So, yeah, I have, and I can remember my mother. I wore little pink pajamas with feet in them to bed because it was cold. And I remember the pajamas.
Cute.
I remember my mother would take me in. She'd take me in. There were 2 bedrooms, and I had my own little bed. And we would kneel down. My mother would help me say my prayers every night. And I can remember her helping me say my prayers, and then she'd always read me a book, and I'd go to sleep. But I have great memories of being really young.
I love this.
But at any rate, so finally Marie was born. And when Marie was born, she was a little baby, and my mother was getting ready to go to work. And it was my job to tend her in her stroller just outside the door of the house until my mother got ready for work, and then we would drive to the Hotel Utah so she could go to work.
And wait a minute, what did you do while she was at work at the Hotel Utah?
I stayed with my aunt. I had an aunt who lived on
Edna?
No, this is my Aunt Estelle.
Aunt Estelle.
And Aunt Estelle was just a nightmare. I mean, she was this grumpy, crouchy old lady that made you eat chicken. She made you eat mushroom soup, cream of mushroom soup for
You ate
lunch.
whatever she gave you, and you were thankful
Not me.
for it.
I didn't care if I ate it or not. I didn't like it. I didn't want to have any of it. It was awful.
You didn't want the cream of mushroom soup.
No,
Okay.
I wasn't very nice about not eating my cream of mushroom soup.
Did you get along better with Estelle when you got older?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did.
Okay, anyway, go
Right.
on. So,
Aunt
so Estelle would tend you while your mom went to
Yeah,
work
well,
at the
Aunt
Hotel
Estelle-
Beating.
Huh?
Beating.
Okay. Leading the witness.
Leading
I'm
the
leading
witness. Yeah, my Aunt Estelle lived on West Temple and about 3rd South in one of those big old 2-story brick building, and they were rickety, but they were brick. And she lived in this old 2-story brick house right on 3rd West.
Okay.
No, West Temple, sorry. West Temple.
Okay.
I guess about 9th West.
9th West and West Temple.
Yeah. Just and it was just like it is now. It was rickety and scary, and
Good God, are there really still rickety old houses at that address?
yeah. And there were trucks, great big, big delivery trucks driving up and down West Temple there to
Okay.
deliver their stuff to
Wow, you paint a picture.
stores and
Yeah.
stuff, and they were honking. It was noisy. They were honking, and things were happening, and but she rented the house from this crazy old lady named Sadie.
Crazy Sadie.
Crazy Sadie. So she rented this house, thank you, from Crazy Sadie. And Crazy Sadie she was a real mean lady. She was a lot meaner than my aunt was. And so if you went outside to play, we'd sometimes go outside to play, but you couldn't go off the lawn because one of those rickety old trucks might run over you, right?
Sure. And how old are you?
Not quite 3.
Okay.
But Sadie would put on her boots that came up to her knees and her old house dress that she wore around, and she comes storming down the steps and go, "I hate you kids and I'm going to kill you." and
I would do that.
we would run in the house, and she'd be screaming about all these kids that were all over her lawn, and I mean, it was really a trip. So when I lived in Tooele, I had this uncle, my Uncle Wes.
I remember Uncle Wes.
Uncle Wes. Okay, well, Uncle Wes decided that I needed a pet, so Uncle Wes bought me a little black dog named Stubby. Just this little black Stubby dog.
Okay.
So my mom would let me take Stubby with me to my aunt's house to get tended. And we were standing there playing with Stubby one day, and Stubby saw a dog across the street and ran across the street, and a big car hit him and killed him.
You saw this with your own eyes?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
That's trauma.
And Crazy Sadie came out screaming at us because I was crying.
I heard that story about near the Sadie part.
PTSD here.
I mean, it was crazy, but anyway, so that's what happened when we lived in Tooele, okay? So anyway, my mother gave birth to Marie, and she brought her home from the hospital. I was supposed to tend Marie when my mother got ready for work. So I had Marie in her buggy, and I was pushing her back and forth in front of my little dumpy house in Tooele, right? So I decided, well, I'll just turn around and take her to the top of the street, and then I'll push her down the
Because
side.
that'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun. She's just crying anyway, and she'll cry more if I just stand here and just keep wheeling her back and forth. So I turn this little buggy around, and the sidewalk is like this wide. I push her to the top of the street, and I turned the buggy around, and I started down. Only the buggy was healthier than I was big. And the buggy got away from me, and it's heading down this thing that's about this steep, and it turned over and fell off the sidewalk
Naturally.
down about 5 feet into a bunch of wet tar.
Oh, tar baby. This is your tar baby story.
So I ran home crying, and I told my mother, I killed Marie, I'm so sorry, I killed Marie. So,
How old is Marie?
about 2 weeks old.
Okay.
Not very old,
Your
little.
mom was cool with that.
Well, she didn't want me to die by upsetting me that I killed Marie. So, she came running out of the house. Don't ask me how she ever got there. I'm sure she was just dying. She gets up there, and here's Marie screaming in the tar all over her. My poor mother picked up Marie and scrambled the buggy up and took her home and cleaned her up. And I don't think she went to work that day.
But everything was okay.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, judging by, current observations, you might have left a mark on Marie.
I did the same thing to Vivian.
Did you really?
You did what?
Yep.
She did the same thing I did.
What's that?
Tipped her buggy over.
I said I did the same thing to Vivian.
Oh.
Did you tip the
I want
buggy
to know
over?
that story. Tell me
Yeah.
that story.
I didn't actively tip it over.
No, I didn't
But you
tip
let her
it.
roll
I didn't
down
have to
the
either.
hill.
It just fell off.
But you let her roll down a hill.
Well, I took a shower and then I twirled and I was happy and then I came back and my dad was angry that stroller was flipped over. Like, we have a maid for that one. But I was like, I took a shower. I was like a summer day. I was so happy. And I was
At least Nana Doe went and confessed right away.
I had to get my mother, man. I was
All right,
in trouble.
All right, so I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know. Marie was born, and that was disruptive to the family unit, right? What happened then?
Well, Marie was a kid that was always in trouble.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, but when she was 2 years old, Jeannie came along. In fact, they're not 2 years apart. They're only about. Well, Marie turned 2 in January, and Jeannie turned. I mean, I think they're a year and a half apart, or 18 months apart, or something.
Okay.
So, then they have 2 little kids, and then they decided to move back to Salt Lake. But
What year? What year?
it would have Jeannie, that would have been in 1950. Jeannie was
So
born in
Tooele
1950.
until 1950.
Right.
So they
From, I'd
moved
say-
from Salt Lake to Tooele in 1946.
48 or
48.
47 or something.
47. So they were in Tooele about 3 years
Right, and then they moved back to Salt Lake and bought the duplex we lived in
on Lake Street.
on Lake Street, right? But, so my mother had already gone back to work, because my mother never took more than a couple of weeks off.
Of course not, because she would have felt really guilty about taking time off.
That's right,
Yeah.
so she'd gone back to work, or was
was a worker.
about ready to go back to work. No, see. Yeah, she wasn't quite back to work yet, but at the same time, she just barely brought Jeannie home from the hospital, and she got a call from her friend that she worked with from Holland, and her friend said, well, thank you for sponsoring my family to come over from Holland, so we're home. And she said, well, I just got home from the hospital. Great, we'll come over for dinner. So they all came over, and I can remember that there was my mom's friends, and there was the people from Holland, and they had a couple of kids, but I couldn't understand them. I couldn't figure out why they couldn't say any words I could understand. You know,
Yeah,
only
it's
spoke
still-
Dutch.
I see that. Yeah.
Yeah, they only spoke Dutch.
1950. This is 1950.
It was 1950.
Okay.
So there you go.
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you for telling me these stories. I love these stories. They're precious to me.
I really wish we got the one earlier about Nana Joe's mom and father.
Those are
that
the
one was
best
these two.
stories.
That one
Well,
was really
yeah.
well.
You
told.
can ask questions,
Those are
and
the
maybe
best
she'll
stories.
tell some of that story again,
Yeah.
or pieces of it at least.
Yeah. No, we
I have it written down.
You wrote it
32
down.
minutes.
I have it
of-
written down.
of
I
video
wrote a paper
stories.
on it. We've heard the stories before, and Daddy doesn't know, but I have it written down.
You've heard them before,
Are
yeah.
you really that organized?
Yes.
That's
Well,
good.
no, I wrote a paper, remember? In my grad school.
Tell me about that.
That's really cool.
Tell somebody about that. Self-psychological perspective on immigrant women.
That was my dissertation.
Is that not what we're talking about?
No.
Oh, okay. I do think you need to tell your son about your dissertation sometime.
Okay.
Okay.
It's there, but
So, 1950. Jeannie's alive as a
Yeah.
baby.
Jeannie's alive, and my
Right.
mom's trying to hire somebody to take care of us so she can go work full time.
Okay.
So she hired this little old lady whose name was Aunt Maud,
Aunt Maud.
and she came and took care of us.
Okay.
And she was an older lady, probably about my age.
Probably about your age now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what she didn't understand was I was really headstrong, kind of like your wife is.
No, really?
Yeah.
Headstrong her?
So my deal, first
Are
of
you
all.
headstrong?
what had?
No.
Come on, don't do